Hello, it's Tony here again. Welcome to the channel if you're a new viewer. Welcome back if you're a frequent viewer or a subscriber. We're into another panel preview now, and let's get into it, I guess. We are here in the lovely Daintree Forest in the far north part of Queensland in Australia. And we're going to do a quick flight down to Cairns. It's not very far from here. It's a little flight that I use for testing quite often when I'm making these Air Manager panels. It's got a nice ILS, and there's an NDB there and a VOR, so it's good for checking out a lot of the instruments and doing a quick flight down, and it's not too long, so it's a flight I use quite often for testing purposes. It's a lovely part of the world. There's a few other ones that I use, but this is one of them, and it's not one I've featured in a video before. So I thought I'd use this as a location for the purpose of this panel, was try and do something a little bit different. So without further ado, let's have a look and see what we've got today. We've got the Bonanza panels. Now you can probably see, well, you can obviously see that these are analog panels, right? But in the simulator. We're in Microsoft Flight Sim here, but these panels originally I made them for Xplane, but these are panels that I'm in the G1000 Bonanza, because that's the default Bonanza that's in the sim. So there's the default aeroplane, but we don't look at the virtual cockpit when we've got a complete instrument panel full of Air Manager panels and makeup sometimes of pop-outs. This particular one I'm using is a GTN radio stack for navigation. So I'm using the PMS panel pop out available for Microsoft Flight Sim. As I said, I originally made these panels for the Xplane Carenado F33A Bonanza, I believe is the model number. So I have various different right hand side panels for the different configurations. There's a dual GTN one I think I made for the Reality XP GTNs. There's obviously a default one without any needing any pop-outs, with a basic radio stack with navcoms and DMEs and audio panels and transponders and whatnot. And I think there's even a GNS version, which I think is what comes with the Xplane Carenado aircraft. So yeah, there's a multitude of different options for that right-hand side panel, and sometimes that has an effect on what's on the left side panel, depending on what's possible in each sim and with the aircraft that they're connected for. But generally, this is the panel and the layout. Sometimes a little bit more, a little bit less instrument, depending on obviously those options. So we'll start, I guess, trying to get. It doesn't look like the weather's too clever here. As you can see, the raindrops on the windshield there. We'll turn the fuel on and hide that quickly. We'll get the power on so that we can get started here. Mixture, all forward, and our prop. Our beacon on. Turn our battery on. And start our engine. There we go, we have a good start. Stick the alternator on. I'm going to go straight out here, so we'll stick the strobe on as well. And the landing light, because pretty much the runway's literally just there. We've already got a notch of flaps in by the looks of it. Yep, the Avionics on. See that weather starting to come in there on the GTN on our location. If the weather gets too bad, I can always put the fuel pump on. Let's get the autopilot in test while we're sitting here. Those tones you can hear are just the autopilot test sequence I've built into that Air Manager autopilot. Now I think we'll taxi out and get out of here. I don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be. Here we go. It's a relatively short flight down to Cairns from here. Positive rate. Bring the gear up. Just got to avoid the terrain on the climb out here. Get a little bit of updrafts off these ridges. Once we're clear of them, it should be a relatively famous last word, smooth flight down to Cairns. Weather's not looking that great, but visibility isn't too bad. Bring the flaps up now. So we'll just get established here, and then we'll have a little chat more about what we've got on these panels. So this is obviously still the Daintree Forest, but what we're going to do is lie down the coast here over Port Douglas and then down into Cairns, which is just off in the distance down there. We'll get the autopilot on. And head down towards Cairns. Make that prop down a little bit. Okay, so what we've got then, let's get a bit bigger on each side. We'll have a look at the right side panel. As I was saying at the beginning, I've got several options for this. This particular one is a GTN based right hand side panel, so I'm using the PMS panel based GTN, which obviously can be used with any aircraft, even if it's a G1000 like this one, which is the benefit of doing this. So it enables me, I've used a similar approach for the Caravan and also for the Baron. So I'm able to make analog panels for all of those three, which are all three of them G1000 based aircraft in Microsoft Flight Sim anyway. I originally developed these panels, not especially for this purpose, but I had them for the Xplane variants, which were all analog ones. I had the Carenado Caravan, the analog variant, the biggest, the G1000 variant, was total rubbish. And the F33A Bonanza, which is also an analog panel, and the default Baron in Xplane. So I developed these panels originally for that use, and realised that, well, I've done all this work for the analog panels. Why don't I adapt the analog panels for use in Microsoft Flight Sim? So I started to have a look at what would that be possible, and was there anything that was going to stop that? And so I started to convert the instruments over anyway for use in Microsoft Flight Sim, so that I could use them in other panels anyway, because a lot of these instruments are quite generic. Some of them are specific to the aircraft, like for instance the airspeed indicator and whatnot, but a lot of the instruments, HSI, the RMI, the VSI, can be used, even the altimeter can be used in any aircraft pretty much that would have that variant of that particular instrument. So it was worthwhile converting the instruments, and then once I'd kind of converted the instruments, it was a case of just flying the panel and ironing out any little niggly issues that were with the operation within Microsoft Flight Sim. So basically it wasn't actually that difficult. There was a few little things along the way that I had to adapt, but yes, I've basically made them so that they work with Xplane and Microsoft Flight Sim now. And the beauty of using them in Microsoft Flight Sim like this is, as I was saying earlier, that you can fly an analog panel if you want to. So as we see with the view here, we have the view of the outside out the front across the cowling and the nose, and you saw those effects on the windshield of the rain when we first started. So it's as if you're sitting in the pilot's seat and you just have these Air Manager panels as your instrument panel. So I've got the option, I think I've shown on my channel the videos for the G1000 variants of these aircraft. So I have the option to fly the glass cockpit G1000 variant, or these analog variants for something a little bit different, which is really nice. It gives you that option of being able to fly either different type and do something a little bit different. And it was a nice little option to have. So that's essentially how they came about. Let's go back to the left panel, the right side panel again, just to finish off up there. So just think what we've got there is, other than the radios that we had, you see there's an Avionics switch just up in this location. It's a bit of a funny location for an Avionics switch, but I guess it is with the Avionics, so kind of sort of makes sense. Some aircraft do have it in some funny locations, but generally it's down with the main electrical switches. But yeah, in the Bonanza it happens to be up here, or at least in the analog Bonanza. There's a landing gear switch and associated annunciators there. Then we've got an encoding altimeter on the right hand side, CDI for nav2. So if you haven't seen all the nav features of the KX165A, I've got some videos on my channel about that. And then an EGT gauge and a prop amp. So the EGT self-explanatory is just an engine instrument, and then the prop amps is just linked to the prop de-ice. If I switch the prop de-ice on, you can see the needle comes up. As I've said, it's just an electrical circuit within the prop that heats the prop and stops it from icing up as the prop amps. Then there's an ELT, and then of course the fuel selector. So I guess because we're part of the way there, it would be a good idea to actually swap tanks while we're here. Anything about these low wing aircraft, you have to remember to swap the tanks so you don't get a fuel imbalance every now and again. And then at the very top is just a switch that controls the cabin light within the aircraft. So that's what that one is. And then if we go back to the, you see the weather's not getting looking too clever here at the moment. If we go and look at the left hand side panel, I'm just going to change the frequency here, because the weather stays rubbish like this. We might need the ILS. So while we're on this side, you can see, well, let's go back to the dual here. You can see this very button at the top here switches between it says GPS nav push to swing. So if I push it, you see on the GTN side it changes between GPS and VLOC. Just do that one more time. There's GPS, there's VLOC. So we're on VLOC now, and we're tuned into the ILS at Cairns, so we'll see if we can get onto that, intercept that, and then the weather stays bad like this. I think it's maybe because it's at this altitude. I think once we start this descent would probably be okay, but it doesn't hurt to be on the ILS. So let's have a quick look at the left-hand side panel then. So fairly self-explanatory really. You've got the 6-pack in the middle, so the instruments you've probably seen before, one or two maybe that you may not have seen. The single needle altimeter, for instance, you may or may not have seen before. I think I may have shown that in a Baron panel before, but I might not, or you may not have caught that, so that's something that's a little bit different. The HSI and the ADI are pretty common instruments in a lot of aircraft of this era, the Bendix King units, and then your normal airspeed, vertical speed, and there's an RMI there for looking at your nav or your ADF bearings with the needles there. But that's all quite nice. Quite nice instruments. And then along the top, we've already spoke about the GPS nav button, but there's an autopilot annunciator there and a gear warning. So if you haven't got your gear down and you're in certain modes of flight, so if you pull the throttle back too far or the flaps are down too much, too early, and you haven't got the gear down, then you'll get a gear warning light there as well. And then next to those, the gear warning light is the analog OAT gauge. So you can see we're not cold here up in far north Queensland. It's well into the, actually it's not that, it doesn't look that warm. It's probably about, what's that, 21, 22 something. I think it would normally be a bit warmer than that, but maybe not. And then a turn and slip, little small turn and slip below that, and then a few associated other bits at the bottom part of the panel there. There's a test switch for the annunciators. You can see all the annunciators come on. You can see the gear light there now, and the light on the GPS nav button, and all the autopilot annunciators, and the alt and the starter energized lights. So basically all the lamps on the panel there just tests to see if they're working, and sets the brightness and the dim for those lamps as well for nighttime operation if you need it. And then at the bottom of the HSI there's a little DME unit. You can see we're about 16 miles out on this ILS into Cairns now. Weather's still quite shocking at the moment. You can see there's definitely an IMC. So if we can rattle through the rest of this panel, we'll have to pay attention to what we're doing. At the bottom there's an autopilot, which you've got all the modes on, but the reason they tend to have the mode annunciator at the top of the panel is a lot of aircraft, the autopilot's sort of out of view, sort of either too low or over to the right in the radio stack or on the right hand side panel. But there's some rules about having annunciation within a certain viewing area of the pilot, and that's why a lot of annunciator panels you'll see front and center, at least on that main instrument panel, because they're just a remote annunciation of what the actual display is doing. If it's too far out of view, you don't want to have to keep looking over that way to see where it is. So I can see the ILS needle has just come in there and we've just overshot, so I'm trying to get back and capture on that now by selecting approach mode on the GPS. So you see, even this analog panels, it's not the most sophisticated of autopilots, but you can fly a nice ILS with it, no problems. And hopefully we can dip out this cloud and you'll see a little bit more of this approach as we get on. So, and then just to finish up, then on the right hand side is all the engine instruments. I didn't go into too much detail about the fuel flow and the fuel computer, which is at the bottom, which was quite a lot of work to make that. It's a lovely unit, but it gives you can add different fuel as you've done using the add and enter buttons. It works just like the real unit. And then you have these remaining, that's how much fuel you've got left, that's how much fuel you've used, and then you've got a few different modes here on the switch. That's telling you how many nautical miles you're going to fly for the for 1 gallon per gallon, so you can sort of see how many gallons you've got left, how far you're going to fly. But then you've got other modes that will tell you different things, like gallons to destination. So if you've entered a flight plan, how many gallons you're going to use to get to your destination, how many gallons you're going to have in reserve after you reach your destination, and what kind of endurance you've got left. So it's telling us with the amount of fuel and the current fuel flow that we've got 2 hours and 20 minutes worth of endurance left. So that's again another useful fuel planning tool. You can see next to that is the fuel pump switch, which I've just turned off. There's an alternate air release, and then above that is the engine, all the engine instrumentation, so a manifold pressure and fuel flow. There's the RPM gauge with a tacho built into it. There's a couple of fuel quantity gauges there, and then in the middle is the cluster with all the temperatures and pressures, so cylinder temperature, oil temperature. There's an amps gauge in there as well, and oil pressure. And then below there's a CHT EGT multi-cylinder analyzer from Insight on the left-hand side, and then on the other side is the vacuum instrument air pressure, making sure that you've got vacuum pressure is good. And then below that is a little flaps gauge, which is probably we could do with a stage of flaps now. So let's give it a stage of flaps and back down on the power now. Bring that prop back up. Not paying much attention here, but we are on the ILS here. As you can probably just see, we're getting a little bit better visibility as we're coming down out of that cloud now. Oh, you can't see because we're looking at the instrument panel, but that's pretty much the left-hand side instrument panel. That's the view out the front there. Turn off those tags so they don't distract us. And let's enjoy the ride into Cairns, even though the weather's not that great today. Only ever been here once, and it was winter, but I can tell you it was pretty warm even for winter. It's a very tropical area of the country, being up in the north of Australia, so much closer to the equator, and so very tropical climate. In the summer it would be very hot indeed, and very humid, but a beautiful part of the country. A lot of the cruise ships come into here. And just off over here I've got a couple of add-ons actually that I've got a little bit of extra ones when I was messing about with the helicopters, and still do, but you can fly out to some of the platforms that are out, because just out to our left here, out into the ocean, not very far, is the Great Barrier Reef, and they do lots of flights out of here and whatnot, and you can get boats and whatnot out to the Barrier Reef, so you can get to enjoy the wonders of the Great Barrier Reef. The power too much, and getting a gear warning there, did that on purpose so you could see that, and you can hear the tone as well. The gear down now, very late. Turn the autopilot off now. You can see it's quite a nice little approach into Cairns. I do enjoy flying here. Got a bit more time, you can even start in Papua New Guinea, enjoy a bit of flying there, and then fly down into the north of Australia. You pilots have done that in the Kodiak a few times, a few videos from woo, a bit gusty on the way in there. Yeah, from missionary bush pilot in his Kodiak. There we go, that's the analog Bonanza. Welcome to Cairns. Sorry I didn't order sunshine. Well, I did, but it didn't arrive. that's the live weather for you in the sim. It is quite nice to just leave it on that and just you get what you get. You deal with it. But they are the Bonanza panels. I've got a couple more panels coming. I've done one for the Britain-Norman Islander, so hopefully I'll be showing that soon, and I'm just completing one for the Douglas DC-3, so that's been quite a lot of work. Those analog aeroplanes, particularly the older ones, use some well, lots and lots of instruments and gauges. I'm still working on that one, so I've not finished it yet, but it's coming along quite nicely, so you'll see that on the channel at some point, I'm sure. But for now, I guess we'll call it a day, and that's just a quick short flight down to Cairns in the Bonanza, and the analog Air Manager panels to go along with that Bonanza, to enjoy a bit of older school flying, shall we say. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.